Now we are ready. Okay. We are in our second class in Perek Yud Ches. Let's see. Take off the hat. It says like this. We asked ourselves the Alter Rebbe asks 4 questions here. We are now describing a whole different style of Avodah. The question is, what makes it different? Exactly how this whole new style works is something that we really have to investigate here. Because what we've essentially said is, the pasuk in Torah says, Kikar v'lecha davar ma'od. This thing is very close to me. And I, after studying for all these 17 chapters that came before, a person could say to himself, it's not so close, it's not so easy, this is very, very hard. What the Alter Rebbe is demanding of me, this whole idea of focusing and meditation and thinking and developing through my meditation and emotion is not something that's Karav Ma'od. At least I'm not experiencing it as Karav Ma'od, right? There are people, there are many great people out there that I'm sure feel it's Karav Ma'od, but I don't happen to be one of them. This is what a person says to himself. So the Alter Rebbe says, okay, we have a different style, a different one, a whole different Avodah, which we're going to call the shorter way, right? So we have to understand how this works. We've said in yesterday's class that this is a way of tapping into the Ava Misuteris, the hidden love that every person has inside of themselves, that he wants Hashem, that he loves Hashem, that he wants to be connected, united with Hashem. That's the bottom line. So now I get it. Okay, so it's a different style than the first way. The first way is something that I am developing, that I'm working on, that I'm creating, so to speak, right? Through my intellect, I create the emotion. Over here, it's something that's inside of me. But the problem is, it's, like we said, misuteris. Misuteris means it's hidden. That means that I have to uncover it. And if I can uncover it, then I can make use of it. That's what we're talking about. When I uncover it, I'm able to make use of it, and then I'll be able to use it over the course of my day, right, in terms of how I'm going to serve Hashem. So that's what the Alter Rebbe told us yesterday. And he said, in order to understand how to make use of it, first we have to answer 4 questions. Number 1 question was, what is this shayrish? In other words, where is this coming from? Right? Because we're not saying anymore that it's coming from the intellect like we've been talking about up until now. So we have to figure out, where is it coming from? Number 2 question is, what is inyana? What is the style? What does it really want? Right? We're going to answer that in the beginning of chapter 19. Then we ask the question, how is this a Yerusha to us? Right? Because it says that it is an inheritance to each and every one of us. So the question is, how is this an inheritance? What does that mean it's an inheritance? And number 4 question is, we talked about many times already this idea that in the Zohar it compares the emotions of Ava and Yira to 2 wings of a bird. And a bird cannot fly with only 1 wing. So we know that there has to be a level of Yira that's involved as well. Okay? So let's start. We're going to start by answering the 3rd question first, which is the idea of how and what is this concept of a Yerusha. So it says like this. The point is, we're on page 46, almost, I'd say, halfway down the page by the period. The point is, Ki ha'avos hein merkava. It says about the avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that they were a merkava. Now, what's a merkava? We're going to be using the phrase merkava a number of times in the next bunch of chapters. The idea of a merkava is that it's something that is totally nullified to its driver. That's the concept of a merkava. A merkava, or a chariot in English, right, is something that doesn't have a decision-making process of its own. If you tell the car to drive to the right, you take your steering wheel and you go to the right, it goes to the right. If it goes to the left, it goes to the left. I mean, nowadays it's a little bit unusual because now we have these electric cars that drive by themselves and everything like that. I mean, back when I was growing up, that was only that was like a TV show. They had this thing called Knight Rider, right, where this car would like drive by itself, and everyone, oh, that's like, that's something, who knows, that like that's like science fiction. Now it's not so science fiction anymore, because now we have it. But if we could go back to the olden days, Merkava, right? We go back to, I guess, most of our cars, still, when you turn to the right, it goes to the right, and the left, and you have to have your hands on the driving, the steering wheel, and you have to have your feet on the pedals, and you have to be able to drive yourself. And the car is going to react to whatever you do, and it's going to be sensitive to every single move of the driver. The same thing, that's what the Avos, what Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were able to do in terms of themselves. They were so completely nullified to God that whatever God would want, it would just naturally happen by them. That's what it was. There's a story actually of a chassid. I think it was a story of Rabbi Hill Paratcher. Forgive me if it was a little bit wrong, but the story is the right story. The story was that he was traveling in a chariot, happens to be a chariot also, right, in a wagon, and he was sleeping, and all of a sudden he woke up and he jumped off the wagon. Like, what happened here? So the story goes that in those days, they had bridges over rivers, but they weren't always the safest thing. And the Torah says you have to take care of your body. You have to take care of yourself. And so he said that he had acclimated his physical body to listen to Shulchan Aruch to such an extent that the body would do things according to Shulchan Aruch, and that even though the chariot was getting close to this river, close to this bridge, and it was about to go over it, he had made a resolution with himself that whenever they would go over a bridge, I guess some sort of extensive bridge or whatever it was, that he would get out of a chariot and walk along the side, because you have a lot of these Hasidic stories where people would be driving on the chariot and the bridge would fall apart and the person, chas v'shalom, we wouldn't hear from him again, right? So this is the idea of being that the body became like a merkava. The body became like a chariot to God. That's the way the Avos were. So it says, therefore they merited to draw down naran livnehem acharehem, that they were able to merit that they should be able to draw down, to bequeath to all of their children after them a naran. Naran means nefesh, ruach, neshama. 3 levels of the soul. Those are the 3 levels of the soul that you find inside of the body. Then you have 2 levels of the soul which are known as the makifim, or the levels of the soul that surround the body, known as the chaya and the yechida. Now, naran literally is different levels of a soul. So the lowest level would be the nefesh. Then comes the ruach, and then comes the neshama. And then you could also say that each one of those can also be split in parts. Like, so you could have the nefesh of the nefesh, the ruach of the nefesh, and the neshama of the nefesh. And the way it works is that based on previous lifetimes and based on a person's avodas Hashem in this world, right, they're able to draw down into their body higher levels. They go from step to step within this, how should we call it, this ladder of souls. In other words, it's my own soul, but I may be only living with, for example, nefesh, the lowest level, the nefesh of the soul. And if a person will do more and more and more and more avodah, more and more work on himself in this world, he will merit to draw down a ruach of his nefesh, for example, or a neshama of his nefesh. And he can go from step to step based on his avodah. Suffices to say, what we're saying here is that the Avos, because of their great self-sacrifice to Hashem, they merited that all of their children for all of history will be able to have one of these types of souls. Ad oilam me'eser spheres de kedusha, from one of the 10 spheres de kedusha, sheba'arba oilam asabiyah, from the 4 worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. L'kol echad ve'echad kfi madregaso ve'kfi ma'asav. Each one according to his madrega, right? That's what we talked about before, based on right, previous incarnations, and basically where this person has been before. And ma'asav means according to his actions in this world. So essentially, we have in all of the four worlds, right? You have the different spheros of those worlds, and those spheros are acting as a root for the different souls that come down into our world, the holy souls that come down into the people of this world. Now, even to a person who is literally the taich of Kal Shebakalim means the lightest of the light, right? In other words, someone who is not necessarily doing what Hashem wants him to be doing with his time, but Poishe Yisrael is even stronger. Kal Shebakalim is more a meaning of like, he just can't be bothered. Maybe he's too lazy or he's like not into it or whatever. Poishe Yisrael means someone who's against. Like, I'm going to fight against, right? God forbid that he's saying he's going to fight against. He's going to fight against. So even this person who is fighting against, he himself merited to be able to have one of these types of holy souls. That's the point that we're talking about, right? So it's true that his madrega, his level, and his actions are going to affect the place from where his soul is coming from and how much of his soul is going to be revealed inside of him. Nevertheless, what we're talking about here is still a godly soul, like we talked about all the way back, if you remember back in chapter 2, right? It's a godly soul that's coming from one of the 10 spheres of one of the four worlds. That is going to happen. Okay? Nimshach zivugam. So that's what he says here. They, namely these people, even these people that are against Hashem, they fight against Hashem, so to speak. Through their relations, husband and wife, they are going to be able to draw down a nefesh, the malchus, the asiyah. You could say a nefesh of a nefesh. So we said nefesh is the lowest level, right? And then within nefesh you have nefesh, ruach, neshama. So a nefesh of a nefesh would be the lowest of the lowest. Then amongst the worlds you have atzilus, bria, yitzir, and asiyah being the lowest. So it could be a nefesh of the world of asiyah. And then within asiyah you have the 10 spheres. You have, right, chachma all the way down to the last level of malchus. So, despite the fact that these people might be against, right, they are still going to draw down a godly soul. The godly soul might be a godly soul of a nefesh, of malchus, of asiyah. Literally the lowest of all the lowest levels, right? But no matter how you slice and dice it, it's still a godly soul. That's the point that he's saying here. They draw down through their relations, the husband and wife, a nefesh, the malchus, the asiyah. Shehi madrega hatachtoina, which is the lowest level, shebekadusha ha'asiyah, of the level of holiness of asiyah. That's the bottom line. So regardless of how they are right now and how they're acting and everything like that, nevertheless, because they are a child from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they are still going to be able to draw down this holy soul. That's the point that he's saying. And now let's go back and show how great this is. Once you're in the levels of Kedusha, however, even despite the fact that it's the lowest of the lowest levels of Kedusha, nevertheless, you have within it the other higher levels of Kedusha. Because where is Malchus of Asiyah coming from? At the end of the day, it's branching out from the highest level of Asiyah, which is Chachma of Asiyah. And where does Chachma of Asiyah come from? Chachma de Malchus de Atzilus. Eventually, where is it coming from? It's coming from Chachma of Malchus of Atzilus, even to the highest world. That's what it has it within it. Because once you're dealing with one group of worlds and the spheres that are in those worlds, and the soul is being made out of that, regardless of how low the lowest point is from which it's jumping down into the body, it is all coming from the same kedusha, the same holiness. That's what he's saying here. Okay? So now he says, Shebesoicha Chachma da Atzilus, which has inside of it Chachma Atzilus, Sheba Meir or Ein Sof Baruch Hu Mamish, which has the or Ein Sof, which has the infinite light of Hashem inside of it, and that's what we're saying. Kirichsiv Hashem b'Chachma Yased Aretz. Right, like it says, like the pasuk says, Hashem with this chachma He established the land. V'kulam b'chachma asisa, and everything is made with this chachma. V'nimsa ki ein sof baruch hu melubash b'bechinas chachma shebenefesh ha'adam. So it comes out from this that the ein sof, the infinite light of Hashem, is enclosed within the chachma of the nefesh of this person. Yeh mi sheyeh mi Yisrael, whoever, regardless of who he is. Regardless of who he is, that's the bottom line. He has a godly soul. Once he has a godly soul, it's pretty much the most important thing is that it's a godly soul. The fact that it comes from the lowest of lowest levels, okay, enachinami, that's where it's coming from. But inside of that is the holiest of the holy. That's the way it works. Bechinas hachachma sheba im orein so baruch hu amelubish ba v'mispashet bechol bechinas nefesh kula lahachios bechinas reisha ad bechinas ragla. Because at the end of the day, just like we see that the chachma, which is going into the body, is enclosed, is giving the body its chayes, and regardless of which level of the soul it is, it's going to have this. Kirichsiv hachachma tichia be'aliyah. Now, let's just finish up with these brackets. Very, very fascinating brackets. And he says like this, Lefamim mamshichim poishe Yisrael. And it's very interesting because we said that once you're dealing with this husband and wife having relations and having children, right, you're going to draw down, at least at the lowest level, the nefesh of malchus of Asiya, right? However, sometimes it happens to be that a person who's a poishe Yisrael, someone who's against Hashem, fighting against Hashem, they might be able to draw down nishamas gavoyas, very high level souls, ma'oid, shahayu be'emke haklipas kamashikasu b'sefer Gilgulim, which were found in the depths of the klipas, the way the book of called the Sefer Gilgulim, which is the book of reincarnation, written by, right, with the words, the teachings of Rabbi Chaim Vital, based on the teachings of the Arizal. That's what it talks about over there. Now, let me explain. In chapter 2, if you remember at the end of chapter 2, it says that the husband and the wife are, based on the level of kedusha that they have, it's going to impact the person, the child that comes out. But if you remember over there, it was talking about what exactly are they impacting. They're impacting what is known as the garment. Now, there's a machlekes a little bit. What is that garment? According to one opinion, it's the nefesh bahamis. According to another opinion, it's the nefesh asichlis. The nefesh asichlis is basically the consciousness of the person, the intellectual aspect of the nefesh bahamis. So the husband and wife, based on the level of kedusha that they have, is going to impact the nefesh bahamis of the child. How strong are his desires? How strong are his temptations? How strong are his different things that are fighting against him in terms of his avodas Hashem? Okay, so obviously a holier couple are going to be able to make holier children based on the level of holiness that they are having. Okay, that's, however, with regards to the nefesh bahamis. What we're saying here, however, is the nefesh elokis is really something that Hashem puts in. And so therefore you could very often, obviously, a holier couple will have a holier situation. That's the obvious, 1 + 1 is equal to 2. However, what the Arizal is saying, right, or Rabbi Chaim Vital is saying in Sefer Gilgulim, is that sometimes what happens is that a very holy soul was stuck, and it needs to come down here into this world. And the klipas, actually, the Or Chaim HaKodesh talks about this all the way in the end of the book of Devarim. The Or Chaim HaKodesh speaks about it over there. The idea of how certain situations, right, a what seems to be like a very unusual a marriage or winds up happening because a very holy neshama, right, has to come down. Like he talks about over there, even that from the relations of Dinah and, remember the whole thing with Shem and Chamor, right, the whole thing, right over there. So it says that Rabbi Hananya ben Tradian, who was one of the great Tanaim, right, who gave up his life, right, he was killed al Kiddush Hashem by the Romans, right. He came out from that relations, right, or the idea of even the concept of Mashiach, right, is going to come out from what? The whole story with Yehuda and Tamar, right? So it happens to be that unusual things happen also. So here, what the Alter Rebbe is bringing is a particular idea from Sefer Gilgulim, that in the Sefer Gilgulim, right, he talks about specifically that sometimes Paishe Yisrael, it could be that people that are mamish going against Hashem and going against Yiddishkeit, could wind up drawing down a very high level neshama. Why? Because the klipas are not going to allow this high level neshama to come into the world in a regular way. Only if, like, so to speak, if the deck is stacked against it, so to speak. Because if he's being born into this type of situation, right, chances are, right, that the klipas are going to get a lot more energy based on what is this holy neshama going to wind up doing. Because chances are it's not going to be doing the things that it should be doing because of the family that it was born into, right? Nevertheless, this is one way that these holy neshamas are able to come down into the world. Okay, we'll stop with the very interesting idea, and we'll continue Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow.